Following a plethora of successful Generation 8 games, Pokemon's 9th generation burst onto the scene less than a year since the release of both Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as well as Pokemon Legends Arceus. Its dual release would be called Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, coming to stores globally on the 18th of November of 2022 to the highest global sales level for any software on any Nintendo platform within the first 3 days of release, amassing over 10 million combined units sold. For comparison, the previous main series title, Sword and Shield, sold over 6 million units in their first week, which was a record for the fastest selling Switch title at the time. Would Pokemon Scarlet and Violet live up to the high expectations of these sales? Would Gamefreak learn from their previous Switch titles to produce their best gaming experience yet? Let's find out. Like my Pokemon Red and Blue review, and yes, I'm aware I've skipped a few generations, but I'll get around to them soon, I'll be providing a rating in the following areas: world building, gameplay mechanics, music and sound, innovation, and visuals. World building will focus on the lore and storytelling communicated by the natural environment, the locations and Pokemon within, NPCs, and characterization. Gameplay mechanic will focus on the structure of the game, how the player interacts with the world and Pokemon, replayability factor, key features including multiplayer, AI, and glitches or bugs. Music and sound will focus on, well, the music, sounds, and how they're used to create atmosphere or storytelling. Innovation will focus on the features that Scarlet and Violet pioneered or made better when compared to previous titles, and how these were implemented into the game. And visuals will focus on everything we see: the environment, the towns or cities, and the Pokemon designs. While there are many elements through which you can judge a video game, some of those I have not included could be difficulty, graphics, or UI. I felt that these 5 were the most applicable to what Pokemon games have aimed to excel at through the years. Finally, while I have approached each of the 5 aspects of this review as objectively as possible, analysing and justifying each score as we go along, it would be impossible for bias to be 100% removed. Saying this, my final score for this game based on the 5 aspects I have analysed is not my personal score for these games. Additionally, while each of the 5 aspects will be given a score out of 10, I'm not claiming that each of these areas is equal to another. Finally, there will be spoilers ahead. Now on to the review. Let's start the world building section by focusing on the story. It's taken a while, but I was in shock with how much time Gamefreak put into the story beats of this game. And not just the story beats, the classes are actually interesting. I could not believe it. It may be more to do with the previous titles being underwhelming, but the subjects you can go to and the tests you can take actually held my attention, unlike previous entries that would tell you just the most basic rubbish you can think of. I'm an adult Game Freak, I don't need to be told how to throw a Pokeball. Back to the school, developers actually included useful information. They built interesting lore into the classes along with side quests you could do between classes. I couldn't believe I was playing a main series Pokemon game. It was actually interesting. And best of all this was optional. Unlike the previous 3 or so iterations, where boring characters would interrupt me constantly with pointless, one-dimensional dialogue, Scarlet and Violet let you choose if you wanted to engross yourself in the lore and the characters. On top of that, I actually got some of the classroom buzz questions wrong. Me, a self-professed Pokemon expert. Mathematics was never my strong suit, okay? While on the topic of characters, Scarlet and Violet offers a lot of nice, unoffensive, and most importantly, not annoying characters, which is a breath of fresh air compared to the last few generations. It's quite refreshing to experience a main series Pokemon game where I haven't dreaded seeing a character, or audibly sighed when interrupted by Hop for the 100th time. Nemona acts as your rival in Scarlet and Violet, and is already an accomplished trainer when you come across her. In fact, she's already a champion, but is excited by the prospect of guiding you along on your journey as she seemingly decides to start from scratch and begin her journey all over again. It didn't hit me until writing this review, but is Nemona just us, but in the future? Haven't we all been in the situation where we've finished a playthrough, become the champion, but we're so excited to start a new adventure? I may be reading too much into it, but if that was Game Freak's intention, that's just great. It may go some way of explaining why Nemona is likable. That, and the way she is clearly marketed towards a young male teenage audience. Next on the character list, we have Arven. Again, I find myself shocked that I have no ill will towards this character. He's a bit of a goof and hopeless at the start. We know very little about him at the start, except for a lot of unanswered questions. That leads to great payoffs later in the game when we discover more about his past. This is completely opposite to what Sword and Shield did, as it revealed Hops and Bede's full motivation and past upfront. It would be the equivalent of Scarlet and Violet doing that with Arven's character, completely ruining any interest. Instead, Gamefreak seemingly employed at least one competent writer this time, and allowed us to solve the puzzle throughout the adventure, rather than all at once at the start. His character is even more likable when we discover his motivation for why he's going after the Titans, trying to heal his sick best buddy. Who can't connect with a character like that? The payoff towards the end of his adventure, when he is finally able to heal his partner, is great. Only the truly heartless couldn't shed a tear when Mombostiff got all better. Then we have Penny. Penny's split identity wasn't a massive shock when it was revealed, but it's a hell of a lot more than what Pokemon games have done in the past, with some rare exceptions. Penny's character arc also has a happy ending, though you're left thinking that the only reason the storyline went with her wanting to take down Team Star is because it made the game more interesting, rather than making complete sense. I suppose her story arc is supposed to teach us that extreme shyness is a curse? I'm not too sure, and I'm not too sure about the decision to have her never reveal who she was to her supposed best friends either. How did the 5 Team Star bosses know Penny was who she said she was? They could have been messaging some 78-year-old and would never know. Her storyline just struck me as a bit unbelievable compared to the well-constructed arcs of Nemona and Arven, though it wasn't bad, just not really great. The side characters end up being a big plus for this game, adding to a stellar cast. Starting with the director of Naranja or Uva Academy, Clavel. His split personality adds a lot of fun to the game, and fortunately the game doesn't try to hide his secret identity. It doesn't insult the player's intelligence, and it makes it obvious that his alter ego is a terrible disguise and one played off for laughs. Plus, there's plenty of scenes with him as his usual self, where you get to know him more and his character develops well. A side character that failed for me was the Professors. The Professors in previous titles have always been a guide for the players in each generation. Sometimes they take an active role in your adventure, other times a backseat. However, with Scarlet and Violet, they're non-existent for 95% of the game. The only role they play is right at the end, and even then, spoilers, it's not actually the Professor. It's a freaking robot. Why? I don't know. Personally, this plotline deflated me. However, the reason why does reflect well on the game. I was deflated because I wanted Arven to have some closure with his mum or dad. And despite the game trying, for me, it never delivers on it. A robot just isn't anywhere near a replacement for Arven's parent. Plus, the orders left behind by the dead professor for the robot don't make a lot of sense for me, or they reflect really badly on the professor because they're then made out to be a pretty bad person. I mean, being dead kind of hurts your chances to improve yourself when you think about it. But on top of that, they've completely abandoned their child. So Arven only had one friend left, and he became a sick boy. All in all, the ending where the 4 friends are walking into the sunset as one happy family is a good one. It's just a shame about how they used the professor character in this game. Probably the worst professor yet. Back to the great side characters, each of the staff members of the school are unique and interesting and offer some funny moments in the game. My personal favourite is Seguero, I think that's how you pronounce it. Just look at that handsome stash. You also have some, shall we say, lively gym leaders. They were fairly mediocre for me, no different or better than the last few mainline series games attempts at gym leaders. The Team Star bosses were enjoyable. They each had a unique shtick, and it was believable that they were once the types of people who got bullied for being different. I was never emotionally invested in them, but none of them were a negative experience, and I found myself interested to hear about their individual backstory at the end of each raid battle thing. Scarlet and Violet also has Poppy, a very young child who somehow has the power of a Pokemon champion. Okay. You do you, Gamefreak. One of the greatest highlights in Scarlet and Violet for me was Area Zero. I was not expecting Gamefreak to include a section where all three stories meet for one big final adventure into the Forbidden Center of Paldea. Now, that's not to say this was an 11 out of 10 experience. In fact, it's probably more comment about how low my expectations were. But low expectations or not, Area Zero really delivered. I was in awe upon entering the final location. The music, atmosphere, the mystery. I could not believe that this was in a main series Pokemon game. On top of that, you had the three main characters who you'd grown attached to throughout each of the three storylines here with you, interacting with one another, actually sounding like real people rather than mindless NPCs. The progression from the top to the epicenter of the crater underground, finding Paradox Pokemon along the way, it felt great. I was so glad that I had not spoiled this story beat. Experiencing it for the first time yourself just hits differently than watching someone else do it. To go through this area and come out the other side, finally dealing with the renegade AI professor, it felt earned. So many times in the last few generations, you would complete the game or some story beat and it just wouldn't be satisfying because it was so easy. This time, while being on the easier side, it felt earned through the story beats you had to complete and the character arcs you had experienced. It felt like a great wrap-up to a solid story. But I can't do a proper review of a Pokemon game without looking into the new Pokemon. Overall, I thought the new Pokemon were great. The majority had designs that were both interesting and believable for a Pokemon world. There are definitely some missteps, which I'll talk about in a minute, but for the most part I was impressed by the designs of many of the new Pokemon. The Smoliv line was one example of a great addition to the Paldea region. On top of that, there were numerous new Pokemon evolution lines that were diverse in types, stats and moves, allowing for multiple interesting playthroughs with new mons. I always love to try out a few playthroughs of a new Pokemon game with exclusively new Pokemon. In Scarlet and Violet, I never had a dull Pokemon on my team. The new list of Pokemon also includes some callbacks to previous gens, like Toedscool, Wiglet, and Annihilate, while also containing mons that become some fans' new faves, like Pawmi, Charcadet's evolutions, Rabska, Tinkertink, Finneson, Cyclizar, and Seatottle, to name a few. But the fun didn't stop there. We were also gifted with ancient and futuristic counterparts of modern-day Pokemon, like Screamtail, Slitherwings, Iron Hands, Iron Bundle, and more. The issue I have with these are firstly, the names are terrible, but also the futuristic ones are unimaginative. Why is everything metallic and robotic in the future? I'm so glad I chose Pokemon Scarlet, because I would have been bored running into multiple robots in the final area. One or two Pokemon like that would have been interesting, but there's no excuse to go into the exact same design for all 7, now 8 of them. Also, the typings make no sense. How is Iron Bundle ice and water? Though questionable typings is definitely not a feature exclusive to this generation of Pokemon games. All in all, I'd say there are far more positives than negatives in the new Pokedex. The Dark-type pseudo-legendaries that require completing a little puzzle to interact with are great! I started using Xianpao in my team, rip in the comments for Weavile though. The box legendaries were about as much as you'd expect. They're no Rayquaza, but they're also no Eternatus. Yes, that's right, I'm throwing shade at Eternatus. Overall, the world building in Scarlet and Violet receives a score of 8.5. Gameplay mechanics. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet did something that no mainline series game had done before. It allowed players to explore the world from the beginning, and by beginning, I mean after the tutorial. Perhaps taking inspiration from Breath of the Wild, the game will prevent you from open exploration until you've unlocked an important milestone. In Breath of the Wild, it was a paraglider. In Scarlet and Violet, it's beginning the 3 story beats. That's the same thing, right? Or joking aside, I was personally shocked that Gamefreak had finally pulled it off. 12 years too late, but they did it, eventually. But I have to admit, I had a great time exploring. In my review for Breath of the Wild, I was critical that exploration only led to Korax and shrines, which got tiresome. But in a Pokemon game, there can be incredible rewards. and Scarlet and Violet delivers, mostly. Fans have been begging for an open world to explore because it fits so well with what people imagine a Pokemon adventure to be. When I was a kid and went on holidays or field trip, I would imagine what type of Pokemon I'd come across in this never-before-seen place. Oh, that plant looks like an Oddish! Oh, I bet there'd be heaps of Magikarp in that river. I would lose myself in my imagination of what the world would be like if it had Pokemon in it. But the games never caught up. In fact, it would take a fan project, Pixelmon, to give me what I always imagined as a kid. For years, fans were delivering content that outshone Gamefreak in almost every way. Story, world building, innovation, mechanics. Now I know to Gamefreak these didn't exist. They shut them down. And while they're within their legal right to do so, it left fans simply asking, why can the fans do it so much better than you, Gamefreak? Release after release of poorly written plots, gimmicky features, and a stagnant battle system had left fans craving for a change, which is why Legends Arceus was so well received, despite its visual issues. With Scarlet and Violet, however, Gamefreak addressed what fans have been clamoring for over a decade: free and open exploration. There are so many places that you can come across in Scarlet and Violet and be rewarded justly with good items, solid moves, and best of all, rare Pokemon. Now this wasn't every single time, since there's a limit to how many moves and Pokemon that exist, but when you did come across something interesting, it felt great. The Pokemon that you could find hiding in different parts of the world easily led to an enjoyment of exploration. Every area offered something new and interesting. And us fans knew this could be the case. We knew for so long that Pokemon and an open world would be an amazing marriage. A happy, fulfilling marriage with lots of little Pokemon babies to enjoy. I've got to work on my metaphors. Stepping out onto the open road after getting your very first starter was such a rush. To see the Pokemon interact in the wild, separate to the player, made the world feel lived in. Made it real and immersive. And unlike early generations, there were many Pokemon to come across, even before the tutorial was over. There were items to collect, families of Pokemon gathered together, Pokemon that would react to your presence by either chasing you down or running in the other direction. Then there'd be some who would just stare you down. You would get a glimpse of a far-off beam of light and wonder what it was, unless you were like me and kept up to date on all the new features. You would attempt to make impossible climbs up small hills to get that out-of-reach item or new move. It was a world waiting to be conquered. You'd come across enough Pokemon to make 3 teams by the time you walked into the first town. You could also come across Pokemon sleeping at night. It was as if someone at Gamefreak actually had the time and passion. The freedom they've created wasn't just in the world there to explore. There was an incredible amount of freedom with the range of Pokemon to choose from. The different battle items that could be purchased early on, and the various moves that could be acquired and taught to your team. Don't get me wrong, I love older generations of Pokemon games, and I can go back to them from time to time. But Scarlet and Violet being able to offer so many Pokemon choices up front before you hit the first gym is something I miss when playing through older games. It was enjoyable to find little parts of the map and spend time exploring every inch of it and making sure that I'd found every Pokemon hiding there before moving on. Continuing with the theme of exploration, as others have mentioned, you could go to the final gym early if you so pleased. Or, like me, challenge the final gym without realizing that it was in fact the final gym. And by final gym, I mean the highest level. Okay, let's see what level your Pokemon are. Oh, moment of truth. Frostmoth. Hormo. Thanks, I didn't warn you. Oh, I'm not liking this. I'm not liking this dialogue. 47! Oh no! Oh no! Shameless plug of my Let's Play if you're interested. The issue with this is that there's not a clear sign of what leveled order the gyms, the titans, or the team star bases are to be done in. Unlike other open world games, Scarlet and Violet does not level with you. There's no level scaling. You could find yourself in an area with really high level Pokemon, unable to progress in that direction. And it's not like these sections are very far away from where you start. The actual order of areas when listed by wild Pokemon levels is all over the place. It mostly follows an area by area formula, but then there are high level areas right next to low level ones, and there's not much purpose to it other than to encourage the player to go elsewhere first. The inability of the game to level with the player really holds the open world experience back, because while you can technically go anywhere, you're still encouraged to follow a set path dictated by the level of trainers and wild Pokemon from area to area. Just briefly on trainers, they no longer make eye contact with you and force you into a battle like they have in previous generations. This time around, you must go up and talk to them, which is a great addition. For those who have short attention spans and want to rush through the game, you can. And for those of us who wish to complete each area's little trainer challenge, you can explore and battle to your heart's content. The game also features different coloured speech bubbles above the head of trainers to either warn the player if one is particularly tough, or if you've actually battled them already. The items you get from completing trainer tasks are also quite valuable and rare, so it's worth doing if you're a completionist like me. The gameplay mostly follows the tried and true method of Pokemon games: defeat the 8 gym leaders spread across the region. Only this time, there's more to it. In previous generations, completing story beats went hand in hand with gym battling. This time around, the more interesting story beats, Team Star and the Titans, can be done without doing any gyms at all. This is great for players who have wanted more freedom in their Pokemon games. The practicality of the game, however, means that you'll be battling gym trainers throughout the story beats just so you don't run into a situation where your level 40 team faces off against a level 15 gym leader, which isn't satisfying to win at all. Each of the 8 gyms have a gym challenge like the last generation, though I'd say that this gem has slightly more fun ones, just slightly. A few more highs than lows. The olive roll challenge was just some mindless fun, so I got a kick out of that. Get it? A kick? Could you kick it? The Sunflora hide and seek was interesting until you have a look behind you to see all the Sunflora glitching out, and you're immediately reminded that you're playing an unpolished game. The Mr. Walksabout challenge with the gym streamer, I just hated. I won't hold this against the game since there's a lot of fans who got a great kick out of it, but for me it was very cringy and I couldn't wait for it to be over. The bidding challenge was trash. The secret menu was tedious, but okay. One gym had just double battles, another one had you pressing a button over and over, and the last one was okay as a simple ski challenge. Like Sword and Shield's gym challenges, they started off strong, but got progressively lazier with the designs of these challenges. Moving on to the Team Star story beats, they offer the chance to utilize the auto-battling method with a boss battle at the end. These aren't particularly challenging if you do them in the right order, but if you try to do one of the tough ones early, you could be crushed under the weight of their respective Starmobiles. Additionally, the Titans offer another more emotional story beat in which you team up with Arven to take down Titans and fix his Pokemon. In my playthrough, I just like to imagine Arven's partner Pokemon was just depressed and he was cheered up by sandwiches. Because why not? I'm not weird. The Titan Pokemon don't offer much of a challenge either, though again, they could if you'd done them too early. It's a good strategy to take down a couple of Titans early on to unlock mount upgrades that will open up the world more. I did love the lead up to Titan battles, and teaming up with the main characters felt far more real than in any previous Pokemon title where you would just babysit your rival in a battle against a baddie. Changing topics a bit, how does shiny hunting hold up? Well, it feels like one step forward and one step back, to be honest. Allowing players to increase the spawn rate of shinies by cooking with the rare Herba Mysticas is a great addition to shiny hunting. However, the bad visuals make it really hard to identify a shiny Pokemon sometimes. There are countless shiny fails online in these games that occur because the player simply cannot see if a Pokemon is shiny or not. What makes this extra frustrating is that Legends Arceus already solved this problem with a sparkle and a chime. Why is that gone? Why are players destined to strain their eyes looking for a shiny Pokemon in a game with poor performance and bad visuals? As I said, one step forward, one step back. One area that Scarlet and Violet didn't fare so well in is the polish. The game at times feels unfinished, with players experience a numerous amount of frustrating crashes, technical problems, with the world not loading incorrectly during combat, and NPC animations that are just awful to see in a main series Pokemon game. Additionally, It's just downright sad how slow the boxes load when you're looking through your collection of Pokemon. They load one at a time and can make the process of setting out your boxes an absolute slog and chore. Another issue worth mentioning is the slowness of battles. Many fans were left a little disappointed by how slow the battles were compared to Legends Arceus. It was clear that in Legends Arceus, everything was streamlined for a more efficient, quick, and satisfying system. However, too often will players find themselves mashing A like they're playing a Game Boy title all over again, through battle cries, each individual stat change, as well as the little pauses in between each move. Add on to that the slow frame rate of the game. The players can find themselves very frustrated and forget about turning off battle animations because that's no longer an option. We were also introduced to multiplayer features this generation. And I don't just mean battling each other online by purchasing an additional online service. You can actually join in on your friend's adventure, or in my case, randoms online in order to evolve my 6 Finizons. You can never have too many happy dolphins in your party. The multiplayer feature allows for 4 players to journey side by side and appear and stuff. Of course, this is only for a short time before communication errors occur. But when it works, you can do things like catch Pokemon from the alternate game. Wow, it's even more time consuming than trading. I suppose if you had family members or friends you were playing with, this could feel amazing. And maybe I'm being negative since I'm forever alone. I mean, taking selfies with friends could be fun. Making ungodly sized sandwiches could be fun. Random comments on sandwiches. Did anyone laugh their ass off about how ridiculous the eating animation cutscene was? Because I did. Oh, who? Fizzy Pop ice cream. Oh, what is going on? It's just silly. Player customization is back, but in a rather toned down manner. As a student of an academy, you are stuck wearing an offshoot of the academy's uniform, making you look rather purpley or orangey, depending on your game. It's a step back from previous generations, even if there is a lore reason as to why. It does provide some mixing and matching of shoes, hats, jackets, pants, just nowhere near the volume of Sword and Shield. It leaves the player scratching their head as to whether this was a good choice to implement. Personally, customization doesn't play a big role in my immersion, but it matters a lot for many players of the franchise. Overall, the gameplay mechanics in Scarlet and Violet receives a score of 6.5. Music and sound. One part of a Pokemon game that has consistently stayed strong throughout the generations is the soundtrack. How does Scarlet and Violet stack up? Featuring over 170 tracks, Scarlet and Violet soundtracks boast quality tracks at a consistency that will never pull the player out of the immersion. The overworld and battle music is themed well to each region and circumstance the player finds themselves in. Take the Inlet Grotto battle theme. This is a music piece you hear early in your adventure when you come across the box legendary. You've fallen from your trail and you're trusting that this strange new Pokemon can get you to safety. The theme successfully captures the mood of uncertainty and potential danger that surrounds the player at the time. Character themes like the Professor theme go a long way in either reinforcing or co-designing the characteristics of important people along with dialogue and design. In fact, the Professor theme hits at the machine-like nature of his or her personality. A lot of tracks pay respectful homage to previous themes while updating and adding the game's own spice to them, like the Pokemon Center theme or the gym lobby. The main title theme and its various iterations through the soundtrack serve to capture the grand open adventure, but also the academic side of the story, mixing traditional piano keys, fast-paced drumming, and classical wind instruments depending upon the time of day and the progress of the player. There are numerous offshoots of the main theme, as I said. But all in all, it works well without blowing the player away. There are some very well themed tracks like Mabostiff's Recovery, which features a very somber tone to reflect the mood created during the aftermath of each Titan battle. While there are also tracks that appear to be rehashed from the previous 2 gens, like Arven's Frustration that sounds similar to Gen 7's Ultra Beast music, or the new Champion song which sounds like an inferior version to the last few themes played when becoming a champion. Though at the same time, the music doesn't leave the same impression that previous generations have. It's a good soundtrack without being phenomenal. Each track applies well to the situation or atmosphere the player finds himself in. If I had to nitpick at the music I'm not happy with, it's a few sandwich making themes. This might have to do more with my dislike for making sandwiches, but its upbeat and jostling tone seems to mock me whenever I make a mistake while making a sandwich. Like someone yelling "ha ha" when my food falls off the side. The music might sound upbeat, but I sure as hell don't feel upbeat after my sandwich bonus is ruined. What I find really hits well are the Zero Lab Battle theme and the Area Zero theme. They are quite different. For me, these tracks are the highlight of the OST. In game, you know that shit is about to go down, or that this place you've arrived in is like another world completely. It fits so well with what you're feeling, but where it excels is that it lifts these emotions higher, not just matching the environment, but making it far better. That's what good tracks can do. In previous gens, the final battle themes have almost consistently been amazing, and it's no different here. It's great to see, or rather hear, that Gamefreak didn't drop the ball on the music like they did with the visuals. Just briefly on one gripe players might have, it's the weirdness of watching animated cutscenes where characters' mouths are fully moving, but no sound is coming out. It is reminiscent of the opening of Sword and Shield and other examples where characters looked off, just opening and shutting their mouths for no reason. This review is not going to make a judgment on whether or not Gamefreak should get voice acting. I mean, costs can't be the problem since they got Ed Sheeran to play music for them, but it seems they've chosen to go with the most awkward choice. As I see it, they've got three main paths to go down. 1, they do what earlier gens have done and have the dialogue with characters that don't contain any mouth movement, which has always worked. 2, they do what they did and have mouth movement with no voice acting. Or 3, have voice acting. The problem with choosing the second option is that it looks cheap and ridiculous. I can't fathom how anyone at Gamefreak thought this was the best choice. Even if you can't get voice acting, keep the mouths shut. Or get voice acting. I guarantee you one thing, Gamefreak, expectations wouldn't be high. Also, it's about time Pokemon said their names. We don't need cries anymore. It's a feature of a bygone era where the hardware simply couldn't produce the sound needed for Pokemon to say their names. But we've moved well beyond that time. Gamefreak, you're not putting every Pokemon in the games anymore. Plus you have the anime to steal the voices from. Get it done. Silly Game Boy sounding noises just don't cut it anymore. Overall, the music and sound in Scarlet and Violet receives a score of 7.5. Innovation has become a sour point for main series Pokemon games over the last few generations, and they have narrowed down to gimmicks. At first, the fans thoroughly enjoyed Megas, but then we got Z moves. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Then Dynamax. Not sure about that. And now Terra types. You do you, Gamefreak. I'll discuss Terrasilides later, but on a positive note for Scarlet and Violet, they innovated in other ways. You could make a solid argument saying that they innovated the story in Scarlet and Violet. As I've discussed the story at length in the previous section, I wish to focus on innovation. The innovation that is Titan battles. Straight off the bat, love them. They were never hard for me, but the lead up to this menacing thing and the way it appeared on the overworld was a delight. Additionally, they tied each battle with an upgrade to your mount, which meant that a lot of players went straight for those first couple of mount upgrades. In total, there are 5 Titan battles, unlocking the following mount upgrades in this order: Dash, Swimming, High Jump, Gliding, Climbing. This allowed for the player to experience not only new areas, but new sections of already explored areas, much like the HMs of old. In fact, it included HMs in this game without many people realizing this is what Gamefreak had in fact done through the Titan battles and the mount upgrades. And the story handled it so much better. When Gen 7 released, and was going to be the first game to remove HMs, it replaced them with Ride Pokemon. However, at multiple points you're just handed a Ride Pokemon for no lore reason. In Scarlet and Violet, they included a sweet story about Arven and his Bostiff that contains an in-world explanation for getting mount upgrades. The only drawback about these Titan Pokemon is that they're very rare. The battle is usually quick and the player can be left wishing for more. I think it would have served the game well to include a few more post-game Titans that were difficult and would reward you with more Herba Mysticas. On top of that, they could respawn after an amount of time. Maybe have a list of 10 Titan Pokemon that appear on some sort of roster and not all at once. Just seems like a missed opportunity. One feature new to Scarlet and Violet was the automatic battle method, as some have named it. It's not a massive change, it doesn't overly affect the way the game is played. It's incorporated into team starfights and allows a speedier way to farm Pokemon drops. All in all, it's not a massively positive inclusion, but as far as I can tell, it has no drawbacks. The player can buy into the mechanic as much as they want. Personally, I only ever use it sparingly. If I had to nitpick though, it can be a bit clunky at times. The Pokemon you send out don't always seem to know what you've asked them to do. Possibly another example of an unpolished game. It appears to also feel the wish of Pokemon fans as a substitute Pokemon follow you feature, though, like Sword and Shield, it leaves a lot to be desired, but for different reasons. The Pokédex was a nice upgrade. Just press the minus button and it provides you a visually engrossing look into Pokemon you've previously caught or recently battled. It also has a recent notes section that I only just realised now and have no idea what it actually does. Ooh, mystery. When you go into a particular entry, it gives an incredibly artistic shot of the Pokemon in the wild. I was blown away that developers put in the time and effort to do one for each Pokemon entry. It reminds me of the 2D era when Pokemon sprites had personality. Imagine a 2D era sprite of Spitop's Pokédex artwork. It would be amazing and memorable. Additionally, you get rewards for every 10 Pokemon you fill in the Pokédex, as well as rewards from Jacques for following his quotas. It's a shame I only discovered this feature when I had already over 200 entries, because some of the items you receive early on are very useful in your adventure, like evolution stones. Overall, I'm massively impressed with the work that went into the creation of the Pokédex in Scarlet and Violet, themed like tomes in a library. Another new feature that no one asked for is picnics. You can enjoy picnics together with your Pokemon friends. It's very similar to Sword and Shield's camping feature, in that you can hang out with your Pokemon friends and make food, but it has a couple of other important functions. For one, great selfies. More important though, this is where you will farm eggs. Breeding has always been an integral part of Pokemon since Gen 2. However, this time around, it's more annoying and less streamlined than previous gens. Again, one step forward, one step back. You could potentially have more than 2 Pokemon breeding and spawning eggs for you, but this is quite tricky to control. Plus, it can take quite a long time for an egg to appear, far longer than Sword and Shield. If you intend on breeding, I suggest you wait until you're ready to do a lot of eggs, because waiting around to breed 1 or 2 eggs just isn't worth the time and effort. It's now time to talk about the terrestrial phenomenon, as scarletviolet.pokemon.com calls it. Let's read a little bit about what they say on the subject. For years, many new regions of the Pokemon series have introduced unique battling mechanics that shape up the core gameplay in unexpected ways. Mega Evolution reigns supreme in Kalos, Z-Crystals provided incredible power in Alola, and Dynamax Phenomenon blew things up in Galar. That's their wording. Blew things up? What? When it comes to Pokemon battles in Paldea, the terrestrial phenomenon is the name of the game. Terrestrialization brings an exciting new twist for casual and competitive players by changing the type of one of your Pokemon during battle. Covered in a brilliant crystalline exterior and adorned with a shining type-based Terra Jewel, terrestrialized Pokemon can turn the tides of battle and look good doing it. Dear goodness. Each time you terrestrialize a Pokemon, you'll need to recharge your Terra Orb by visiting a Pokemon Center, resting in a bed, or interacting with a Terra Raid Crystal. Terrestrializing changes a Pokemon's type to its Terra type for the remainder of the battle and increases the damage dealt by moves matching that type. Once you factor Terra types, that's when things really start to get interesting. A Salamence with the electric Terra type will terrestrialize into an electric Pokemon, so its electric type moves become more powerful in addition to the original same type attack bonus for its dragon and flying type moves. If that Salamence then changed its Terra type to Dragon, it would subsequently terrestrialize into a full Dragon type, effectively losing its Fire type for defensive purposes. Boy, that was a mouthful. It's interesting that they don't even try to hide the fact that this is another gimmick in the style of Mega, Z-moves, and Dynamax. They're owning it now. Seems like Pokemon fans are doomed to be fed mediocre gimmicks for the rest of time. While there are still those that hang on to hope that Megas will make a return. Keep dreaming. On the surface, Terrestrialize appears to allow you to change any Pokemon's type. And while this is technically true, most types won't be an option. You would never want to change your Pokemon to an Ice type, for example, or one of the several types with many weaknesses. And you'd probably wish to avoid types that don't match any moves that your Pokemon can learn, though that could still work with a good defensive type. In reality though, most players will be happy with a Terra type that matches its already existing type for the boost to stab attacks. Our favourites, or Pokemon we journey with, are mostly based on their typings, and design of course. If you want a strong Fire type, you're not going to look to some pseudo-legendary fighting type with only one Fire move and Fire Terra type to fill that need. You'll find a Pokemon that knows what it means to be a Fire type. It's a rare thing for a Pokemon with a different Terra type to its original typing to actually be more useful than the alternative. Though, on the plus side, you can finally give Flygon that bug typing you've always wished it had. Oh wait, no you can't. It's not in Scarlet and Violet. Sad face. The idea of Terra types, having a Pokemon secretly have a new type, is great on the surface, but its execution leaves a lot to be desired. On a similar note, Terra raid battles. Boy oh boy, did they drop the ball with this one. Another example of one step forward and one step back, Gamefreak looked to improve upon the Dynamax raids of Sword and Shield, and upon viewing early trailers revealing them, many fans were pleased that you wouldn't have to wait for others to take a turn during Terra raid battles, which was a massive issue if you did Dynamax battles online. Unfortunately, this just led to other technical problems. Problems that haven't yet fully been rectified. And I imagine Gamefreak has no intention of rectifying, since they already have your money, sucker. While the problem of slow battles was fixed, the trade-off is that sometimes if you're not quick enough, and I mean really quick, you'll miss your chance to select a move for 10 to 15 seconds. Your menu will just disappear, and you'll sit there wondering why the battle is taking time, telling you every single status change. I thought these battles were about speed, Gamefreak. Additionally, the damage you do, especially in tougher battles, may not be accurately shown in the damage bar of the opponent Pokemon. And no, this has not yet been fixed, and it never will be. You'll get off a good shot, and the damage will plummet. Then all of a sudden, the health returns, and now it's got a shield up. What? What the hell is going on? Also, the battle can drag on during the final parts of the battle, with the amount of animations it shows. No actual attacks take place in this part, of course. It will just show you a slow animation of the shield breaking, or your Pokemon fainting, and then just sit there. Nothing will happen as the time ticks down, and you're left mashing A, hoping that the screen will change or something will happen. It's shocking how poorly implemented this feature is. Game Freak just can't make a good raid battle. They've had 2 generations to get it sorted, and it still sucks. It's majorly hampered by very obnoxious technical issues, and Game Freak knew this would be a problem. They clearly can't optimize their games on the Switch the way plenty of other developers can, yet they still choose to run a raid system heavily reliant upon good optimization. Why? Why are you trying to create something you know can never work? All in all, it's quite the mixed bag for innovation. Some things are an absolute godsend, while others are utterly hopeless. Overall, the innovation at Scarlet and Violet received a score of 6. Visuals. Let's get straight to it. The visuals of this game are handcuffed by some very poor frame rate inconsistencies and poor lighting effects. On top of that, models pop in and out very close to the player, a leftover relic from Sword and Shield. Even for some characters close by, it's like watching someone's first attempt at stop motion animation. It pulls you right out of the experience to see a glitchy kid animated at 2 frames per second sitting by the player during a school lesson, or watching an NPC glitch walk their way past you in one of the cities. On top of this, there's model clipping issues. Times when the camera is stuck showing you a great visual of the ground plus a big blue blur. It's so frustrating because this game had such great potential to pull you in and take you on an incredible journey through some of its visuals. The architecture of the towns is really nice if you stand still around very few NPCs. And the Pokemon models, when up close, look fantastic. It's too bad they don't fit with the low-res textures on surfaces and at times bland ground textures. When in battle, it takes a concerted effort to ignore low-res textures so you can feel immersed in what is some amazing Pokemon designs. It's hard not to describe Scarlet and Violet's visuals as bipolar. They're at both ends of the spectrum here. When you run into a wild Pokemon and it zooms in on it, and you're one-on-one with relatively few background animations, the visuals can look stunning, though it's likely due to the low-res textures being too far away to notice. The Pokemon designs look stunning, except for one massive example. Now, this is probably a personal issue I have with this Pokemon aesthetically, but Quaquaval is horrifying to look at. Why? Why is it like this? It moves in such a hideous fashion. It's so unsettling. And yes, I know what it's supposed to mimic, but it does it in the worst possible way. I'm surely not the only one who wants to kill it with fire when I see it. I've gone so far as to avoid using it in one of my playthroughs. I boxed it when it evolved. It creeps me out. Anyway, with that out of the way, the rest of the Pokemon designs are quite good. I don't have time to go over each new Pokemon and rate it smash or pass, but just know that I'd smash most of these Pokemon. They offer some very unique styles too. For example, Bramblin is a ghost inhabiting Tumbleweed. Sounds stupid on the surface, but for me, I love its design. Others may not, but I find with this new dex, there's something for everyone's niche likes. It continues the tradition of including new Pokemon based on old Pokemon designs, but even for these, it does it well. There's nothing close to an Alolan Persian in this lot. Shout out to Roaring Moon and Great Tusk. They look really good, says the guy who has Scarlet. And this is a bit off topic for the visual section, but we finally got a Dunsparce evolution, everybody. We did it. Dreams really do come true. After 7 long generations, it finally happened. Maybe if we wait another 7 generations, raid battles will be good. Additionally, the world itself, with its different terrains, locations, and elevations, make for an interesting experience. I thoroughly enjoyed the world of Gens 3, 4, and 5 that contained interesting and unique locations within the world. But with Scarlet and Violet, it's dialed up a notch. The areas of the map that contain various terrain, like the snowy regions or the desert regions, are quite large. The only drawback compared to previous gens is that there would be more interesting things in these locations, like interesting cave or some fun puzzle to solve. Whereas with Scarlet and Violet, it's mostly the terrain, some features, and that's it. Not a lot of hidden areas or secret patches to explore. Now that's not to say there's none, because there are, just not as much as previous generations, especially the 2D era. Saying that, the experience of each new terrain and the exclusive Pokemon that would only exist in these terrain types made the game really fun to explore. It pushes the player to find every little nook in the world for those out of the way or rare Pokemon. Additionally, the towns and cities in the Paldea region are visually unique, each containing vibrant colour and different personalities. They're clearly based on actual locations from the Iberian Peninsula, which immerses the player further into believing that this world is lived in. Unfortunately, this grounding is completely taken away when you enter buildings. There's no indoors in the region. Stores are just menus. Another example of one step forward and another step back. When you enter a Pokemon battle, however, the game demonstrates its greatest visual potential. You can actually see the fur or the skin or the texture of each Pokemon when you encounter it. It's actually a bit of a shock to go from the overworld, where textures are mediocre to say the least, to an up-close battle where you can see striking detail in each Pokemon. It's the best of looks since Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, or the new Pokemon Snap. It's too bad you have to ignore the poor ground textures on which they stand. Each move looks fantastic. The details they put into each move, plus the stills they created to represent the moves in the TM creation menu, are really well done, much like the amazing stills included in the Pokédex. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of the good visuals end. The graphical quality of the rest of the world pales in comparison to other Switch titles, including launch titles like Breath of the Wild and ports like Dragon Quest XI. It's something that players have to spend time getting used to and not play any other game in between in order to get used to the low-res graphics. Overall, the visuals in Scarlet and Violet receives a score of 5. In conclusion, Scarlet and Violet receives a score of 33.5 out of 50. As I said in my introduction, this isn't my personal score for these games. This isn't my rating on how much I enjoyed it. It's a score calculated from both the pros and cons of each section. However, I don't consider Scarlet and Violet to be a failure of a game. It's definitely a flawed game, but if you can get past those flaws, there's a lot of enjoyment to be had. Scarlet and Violet is at its best when it's telling a story, and at its worst when its visuals are in full focus. As I said numerous times throughout this review, it's one step forward and one step back. I hope you enjoyed this review of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I'll be back with many more reviews, including Tears of the Kingdom, and more Pokemon main series games as well. Farewell.